Irrational Radio.
Create something.
Kyron, what is the word of the day?
Oh,
Oh,
we're
shit.
not doing that with this. We don't do that with this.
I know,
We
it
do
was a joke.
topics.
It was a joke. I know. It was a fucking joke, Kyron.
I'm sorry. It wasn't
It was a
very
joke.
funny. It was a bad
Thank
joke.
you.
Push the talk button so I
Bad
could
joke.
shake my head.
John One actually told me that if you make like 1,000 jokes and one of them is hilarious, then you're known as a funny guy, right? So you just make a lot of
right.
really shitty jokes, and every once in a while you get
Unless
a razzer.
you have
Now I
that
feel
guy
attacked.
who only is around for the 1,000 jokes that weren't funny and missed the one joke that was. Then you're the guy that
One.
to that guy you're the guy that
Oh
is
my God.
not funny.
This is table 13 where we talk about D&D.
Oh shit!
Clearly.
That's right. Today's topic is story arcs and plot building within the scope of D&D. This is something that is kind of near and dear to my heart because I have a degree in creative writing, and so this is how I pretend that wasn't a complete waste of time, is trying to apply the degree to D&D. So, we should define our terms here. So when we say like story building, it's not the same as writing a book or setting up an outline for a play or a novel. When I say like story building, I mean kind of the act of writing the story as the session is going along. Because if you try to sit down and write out what will happen in your campaign, we've said many times it's going to go off the rails. But there is, and we do this, every single DM does this in like, what things do you keep in the session, or what do you focus on in the session, and what do you ignore? Some people are going to talk to a shopkeeper, and it's up to you as the DM to make that shopkeeper really important or not. And, whether it comes up again or has anything to do with the plot at whole is up to you. And so each session, you kind of look back and go, okay, these are the parts of that session that I wanted to keep, and those are the parts, and these are the parts of the session that are not important or I don't want to focus on. And so I guess like to open it up to you guys is like, what do you go about thinking of sessions that way, or am I the only one? Like when a session happens, and the things that have taken place in that session have taken place, do you guys sit back and try to build the next session's story based on what you found important? Or is it just like, okay, now I'm going on to this next session, and it's kind of like a blank slate?
Well, this is sort of like a prep question, somewhat, right? Like there's some level of this is about how do you prep, your next session from the first session. And typically when I'm prepping story-wise, because I don't really prep anything but story, I'll prep like a chunk, right? Like a bit of a this bit of the arc, the city they're going to, this whatever, and it's very much, I guess, more. But I once I do that, I don't have to prep again for like 3 or 4 sessions,
Right.
And I'll typically, I'll make little changes here and there based off of what happens, because obviously I'll create something, and I'll have basically an idea of what I want to achieve from it, but how they get there is entirely up to them. If they could go completely, totally wrong way from what I expected them to do, and just working off of them and the actions that they take, I typically try to make it a coherent story, kind of on the fly. And if that means that next session I have to trade out what an important NPC that I had come up with was going to be, then that's what it is.
Okay, interesting. How do you make the choice between something that will be important to the story or something that you think that role players find important to the story, and what is like extra fluff that happened in a session? Or
I
you
think
just
they're
like
one
feel
and
it
the
out?
same.
Okay.
I think they're really, what the players find important is what I try to make important, because that's what they're going to give a shit about, right?
Yeah, you can't make them care about your stuff unless you can tie it into something they're already interested in. I try and figure out, like, if it's Shady's, the freaking, ice cream store or something, like, you know what I mean? There needs to be some value out of going there, or, at least some benefit to the game, even if it's just a funny NPC that runs it, and if they keep going
Right.
back there, then it's like, yeah, all right, you should try and find a way to make that something that they can continue to do without feeling like they're just spinning their wheels and farting around kind of idea. And that's, I think that's it. Otherwise you're just like, if you develop too much that they're not already showing interest in, then it's just not going to end up coming to the table, basically, because unless you are forcing them into that position for the most part, because they're probably not going to follow the hooks along, unless it's connected to something that they're already invested in, basically.
And that's really, I think, that one of the tricks that us DMs use to get players invested in a story is suss out what in the first few sessions the players really want to do or actually are interested in, and then figure out a way to marry that into our ideas so that we can both play the game, because it's not just the characters running, along and doing it all themselves. The DMs have to have some input as well, and so you kind of got to take what they give you and then turn it into something interesting. And so I guess that act there, like taking what they're interested in and turning it into a cohesive story, is kind of what I want to focus on, because there are a lot of strategies for doing that, and there are a lot of processes that you can use to, either make it better or even overcomplicate the process. And I think that it's something that every DM does that I think sometimes gets overlooked. So when you have like a character's backstories and they've gone through a few sessions, they're interested in something. I really try to set up or at least a rough version of the classic rising action, falling action, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution arc that is kind of fundamental in storytelling. And I do that when I say story arc. That's kind of what I mean, is that there is like in each campaign, I suppose, there's a large arc that I want them to follow. I have some kind of big bad or overarching threat that like faces the world, and it's up to me to figure out how to build the arc into that resolution. And then there's like the smaller arcs that are like, for instance, in Dragons of Paralandia, you guys, like, securing the mine was a larger arc because it took multiple sessions, and it was, it was something that was kind of esoteric at first because you had no idea where the mine was, and it took a long time to get to. But then in that, each session was also a small arc. Because, in each session you have some kind of problem, or at least in good sessions, you have some kind of problem that you want your role players to solve. And, you can look at this in dungeon ways, each, arc in the large view is each dungeon. But then, you have like each level of the dungeon, and then you have each room of the dungeon. And they can be looked at as like sessions or like the rooms of the dungeon, where you don't want every room to just be, empty. They're just going to walk through, and you're not going to be able to build anything from that, because that's, you're not going to sit down and have this whole dungeon mapped out. You're kind of mapping it out as they're exploring it. And so if the first room has nothing in it, you have nothing to build from.
I think that's like a lot of this stuff. It starts before session one, most of it, and like I think like session 0 stuff is really important, where you try and like if you really want to figure out what your party is interested in, like develop it together. I mean, if you can figure out a plot that's interesting specifically to their characters in some way, shape, or form, or at least a background conflict. They have the dagger system that Kyle had us use for Gods of Aether, which I really like. And it's you. Hang on, it's you have like a non-party relationship, somebody who's like basically good or bad, positive or negative relationship, a regret is like something in their past that they wish they had done differently, a short goal that can be accomplished in like a session or two, a long goal that's like something that's more than a session, probably a more like a campaign long goal, and then that kind of stuff that you can use to like tie characters into conflict to use as just sort of levers to interest them, because they help define that stuff. I think helps a lot down that line anyway.
Exactly.
That's a lot of it's a lot of what fuels my stories. A lot of times I'll start a campaign and I don't really, I might have like there's a couple of like worldwide events or global events that are occurring that are maybe good, maybe bad, maybe neutral to what the party's interests are. And they can choose to interact with that, or they can choose to just experience the backlash of it.
Right.
Because really, I mean, if you look at it from the point of view of the players, they are, or the characters, I guess, they're playing, they're living, and they have goals and they have purpose on their own, and those are the only thing. Not everybody wants to save the world. Not everybody wants to take down the evil king at the end of the fucking road.
Right.
Some people just want to go find their son, or want to go play in every tavern in the land.
Or freaking sell drugs if you're in
or sell drugs.
Or you any of the campaigns, yeah.
But that's where all the story comes from, is the background. I'm really big on characters having backgrounds so that I can use that and I can tie it into the big event.
Yeah.
So they're trying to find their son. Well, they were kidnapped by an agent of this evil king at the end of the road, or whatever. And then now they have a reason to want to go fuck with that king, And if I can get everybody on the same page there through sort of their own characters in interests, I guess, then it draws the people together on a believable level.
Yes. I think that it's very important to encourage backstory writing and encourage things like session zeros in order to generate some kind of plot that each character can be, tied to quickly without a lot of hand waving or like, oh, you just are there. You can, though this is something that I think kind of gets at there are two kinds of this kind of story building that we're talking about, and like you're talking about one kind here where you like sit down and you talk to them and you have backstories and you have session zeros, but then you still have to do the kind of story writing they would do if everyone in the room was just like, let's play a D&D game and we want a setting that like is brand new. And so you literally have to like sit down and you make the characters there, and you have like a blank slate.
I mean, if you're just pulling it out of your ass, then you're pulling it out of your ass. Nobody's going to be able to expect too much out of you.
Right.
If it's everybody just sitting down to play a game. So I think you do your best in those situations to kind of, but I mean, there's some onus on the players in in those circumstances to make characters that are agreeable too. Like I don't think, that like personally, I don't anymore. I don't want to do I'd rather not start a game without a session zero, because it's everybody can get together, talk about their whole idea, make sure everybody that there isn't like the super evil necromancer and the super good paladin in the same party, trying to make that make sense or something like that. But obviously, every time stuff happens. But I think that then, the onus is kind of on everyone as a group to be agreeable and kind of try and go along to get along. Because as a DM, you're kind of just going to be flying by the seat of your pants anyway, which happens to a certain extent. But I usually try to have a few things that I'm expecting to happen, and then spend half the session pulling stuff out of my ass anyway. But like, or fleshing those out in different ways or whatever, because I had to tweak because I forgot you didn't have detect thought spell slots or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Please, Basil, cast detect thoughts.
Like,
Come
dear
on.
God, you can read minds. I don't have any
No,
spell slots.
spell slots. Yeah, but use them all, burning everything in the circle. But no.
Sorry.
So I was. It was really long-winded. But I was getting to get to that, like what I described, sitting down with nothing and just with people that have no backstories whatsoever, is an extreme form of the like running by the seat of your pants that you're going to do as a DM regardless. Like there are going to be times where you're going to be like, oh man, this like they're going to Shavy's again. How am I going to make this like into the story? How am I going to bring this thing that they're interested in now into...
I was going to set Shavy's on fire if you guys want to like, no, that was like, if they go as a group, I can just boom, it's on fire. It's part of this like weird plot that's been going on
with the bank and all.
Then I'll make it important somehow later, and then they won't just be getting goddamn ice cream again. But then you guys stopped going 3 times a session, so it wasn't like, and you guys were having fun, so I didn't want to fuck with it too much. But I was like, I can, if they won't go anywhere else, I can bring that conflict there if I have to.
Some of the art of it comes from marrying what the players want and what the role players are interested in the world that you're dealing with. And I suppose, talking about this kind of thing really does presuppose that the people listening are not running a module, because that is something completely different in terms of like story building, because there is still some room for story building within a module.
It's a lot. I mean, you're much more restricted on what you have to get to. You're not able to just say, okay, I can switch this, and this, and then these are all the same person now, and boom, like it, or at least without having a very extensive knowledge of the module, which is a lot more work than making one, I think.
I feel like running a module and building your own story are two totally different games for two totally different types of people. If you're somebody who wants to sit down and play through a game of something like a board game or like, something where there's rules for each player, for each character, for everybody involved, including the dungeon master, then I think a module's for you. You can sit down and spend, a few hours before your session or prep a little bit. I mean, but you're like following a guide. You're playing the video game and following the guide at the same time, and it's like
I don't think it's similar exactly there. I think you do have the structure. It's as if somebody else built a campaign and handed it to you, which I guess is obviously that's not a great metaphor. That's what's actually happening. But but the problem is that it's I think I don't. I think it's a great place to start as a DM, and I think it helps. It's really hard for me to run modules effectively because I don't feel the flexibility. I think that's what, is the crux of it, though.
I mean, sure, it's accessible, right? Like it's you can make a story without without knowing how to make a story or without having the.
That's just you don't have the
ability to pull something out of your butt during the session.
Building a whole world, I guess, is the other.
Well, sure, but at the same time, I mean, it's no less work than that. It's just a different type of work. It's something where instead of sitting down and building the world, you have to sit down and study the world. Instead of creating, it's learning about. And that's why I hate it, because I don't want to sit there and read a book and learn about this world.
I can imagine,
and I've never been into it.
That there are some people that prefer that method of.
That's what I'm saying.
Of like running campaigns is
that's
to
what I'm
have
saying.
Like that bedrock.
Well, there's nothing that forces you to not take a left turn and let them dick around doing whatever in this corner of the module for a while and then bring them back a chapter later or something. But I definitely there is a sort of loss of the flexibility that you have in your own brewed setting, but yeah, I guess if you're not able to sit around and put down, okay, let me draw the map, let me get where everybody lives, let me build the whole society and structure all this, and then I'm going to go through and start doing all the plots and everything else too, or at least that's how I go about all that process, as we've talked about before. But it's, then you can just say, all right, let me look through all this stuff. All right, I know enough about the Forgotten Realms setting that I can wing it from here. Cool, I spent 30-45 minutes to get this ready for my next week's session, or an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it is. And then it's kind of off. You've got that. You check the box, like you're saying. Though it's a different kind of game, I think, on a lot of levels. But it's I don't know.
It's still D&D, or it's still role playing. It's just it's the world building aspect
within different confines and way.
Yeah.
It's.
And I guess we haven't said it yet, but obviously this is just what we say. Everybody's got their own table and their own fun, and that's wrong.
No, I am God, and my word is law.
That's true. Brett's pretty much black and white. He's a Sith. He only deals in absolutes.
Only deals in absolutes. So kind of along, well, I guess this is a segue. I also wanted to talk about conflicts in story arcs.
Nailed it.
Because I think that that's something that would be interesting to think about. So I got like a little thing here. It's just the conflicts that we find in literature a lot. And I'm sure that if you've taken any kind of introductory English class or creative writing class, you've seen these before. But you may not have thought about applying them to D&D or role-playing in general. And their man versus nature, easy enough. It's just, the main character is fighting against forces of nature. Man versus society, main character is fighting against forces that are present in the society that he is inside. Man versus technology, conflicts against, you could actually kind of combine this with man versus society, honestly, in my opinion, sometimes. But
modern world, anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Though, you could make a story about, someone from the 14th century dealing with the printing press, which would be a man versus technology, conflict without the fancy technology. And then you got the easy ones: man versus man versus self. Man versus reality is an interesting one. It is, kind of an example would be Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where it's the perceptions or how the world works. Like the Truman Show, kind of, sort of, could be technically man versus reality as well.
Is there another Jim Carrey movie you could reference for me?
Yep, yeah.
would you consider something like The Matrix? A lot of that
man versus reality. Yeah. Ooh, that's a good one too. But there are often conflicts between the character and how the structure of the world works around him in terms of physics. And you could kind of say man versus a magical system in D&D would also be a interesting
planeswalking situation.
Yeah, exactly. The plane of light is out of balance and it's causing disruptions on the celestial spheres. But then that kind of brings us to man versus God here, which is something that a lot of people talk about too. It's conflicts between evil gods, good gods, and player characters are common. Man versus no God is very very Nietzsche. Nietzsche. It's basically the
Nietzsche.
But yeah, the conflicts between finding out that the cleric's god doesn't exist and all his power comes from himself. And then man versus author, very fourth wall breaking.
But I mean, you can look at all D&D like that.
Yeah. Though I want to hesitate saying that DMs should take an adversarial role in,
I mean, you don't want, that's
right.
true. It's not like a competition, but
right.
like in some sense, there is like the forces of the author arrayed against the forces of, you know, the protagonists or whatever.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sorry, didn't mean to hijack you there.
No. That's fine. That's the whole point. Is when you guys are here. It's hijacking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm supposed to talk. So I guess going back to Man versus No God, I think that another way, like absent or like not very active gods, like I something that I use a lot in a lot of my settings because it's just a bunch of crap I don't want to deal with usually. Like the whole pantheon thing's kind of a problem. It's like a bother, and you know, getting players interacting with deities and stuff like that is like a whole thing. But uh, um, I guess you know, yeah, I feel like that's another example of it. They don't have to actually like not exist per se. They could just be detached or like impotent or whatever. I guess like you can have the man versus God conflict without it being like literally the hand coming out of the clouds kind of God thing. Like I mean, there are forces of or especially in D&D where there's the way magic tends to be defined is like clerics and stuff like that you can, you know, warlocks, whatever. It's, you know, it can be very literal, or it can be a little more indirect and kind of dealing with the forces arrayed against you kind of thing again.
And you can combine these conflicts as well.
For sure.
Because, you know, man versus God could be very well like man versus God versus society, where you have like a society built up around worship or belief in this god, and if that god exists and you have a player character that's trying to go against it, they're going against both the society and the god. And again, this isn't necessarily just for whole campaigns. You could talk about these conflicts within sessions or within few sessions as well. A Dragons of Paralandia example is when you guys were talking to the farming people. You guys were in Applegate. They were horribly racist against anyone who wasn't a human.
Right.
And that was a problem that you guys had to deal with in that session. But, you know, while the rest of society isn't, you know, much better, you're not going to get run out of town from, you know, other parts of these cities in Arborea. And so, like, that problem was really only present in that session or in those couple sessions that you guys interacted.
Well, I mean, that's what sent us off to go get the dragon eggs.
That's
and
true.
Stuff, though, actually, because we were doing that so we could get the supplies. We had to win their favor in some way, shape, or form. And so we were going to rescue an influential dude's daughter, basically. Yep. And then
so that he would give you.
So I mean, but that's the thing is, those little details like that can send, you know, it can define what your players end up doing. You can throw something little like that in, and that they need to, you know, it's like, okay, they need to get stuff from the town. It's a really simple fetch quest, but it's like, oh, but the town's racist, and because your whole party happens to be non-human or, you know, non-standard Tolkien fantasy races. And that's stuff like that is how you can add wrinkles without, you know, just like piling roadblocks or whatever. But making things interesting, I guess.
Yeah, and that's another thing that kind of brings me to another point here, is that you want to be careful with how many of these conflicts that you're piling up on your role players, because you don't want to get into the you know, like if they're interested in, I don't know, like an artifact or something, and they're, you know, like trying to find this MacGuffin, and you're like, okay, well, you know, it's in a library somewhere, and then they find out that there's another person trying to find it, and so now you have, like, you know, they got to get into the library and they got to outsmart this guy. Well, then, you know, I'm dragging this example on way too far, but basically, if you start piling so many roadblocks in front of them, you're going to get tangled up with the conflicts, and you're not going to be able to resolve each conflict in a way that's going to be very satisfying. Because
Now I feel attacked. Sure.
No.
I do feel that, though. I do feel that,
No, you're right.
A lot of times
Absolutely.
what you'll run into, and I think, with, I think, experienced and inexperienced DMs alike, is that they'll get caught up in the minutia of, I don't want to say minutia, but
That's a good
just
word.
kind of like the different pieces that are all interacting together, and they'll maybe like focus in and kind of like with laser eyes to how they would react to every single situation, and then make that about the players, and then it's like I just came to buy a fucking sandwich, and there's been 40 different things
No,
that have
I'm
been
Right.
an
definitely
issue
being attacked.
in the way. And it makes the players feel a little bit like it's more work than it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think keeping it simple is probably good advice.
Yeah.
Um,
Keep the conflicts straightforward for the most part. Like you want different sized
Yeah, Eric.
conflicts stacked up, but you don't want like a bunch of tiny conflicts in front of a resolution. So an example would be like they're trying to get to the courthouse, and you're like, oh, the street is got a funeral procession. So if you go too fast, you make too much noise, you're going to upset the funeral procession. And then you're like, oh, the courthouse is locked right now or closed for some reason.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh,
Yeah.
the dude that you were looking for is actually like, he's sick right now. So you got to find the juju berries to make him feel better. And then they go try to find that. And then they're like, oh, the juju berries are out of season right now. And then you're like,
oh, it's the
why?
big Oron sword.
Yeah, what are we doing? What were we trying to do this session? And you don't want to string together a bunch of the little like conflicts that only serve to extend the arc you're working on rather than make it more interesting or upping the stakes or even resolving stuff. I see some DMs and myself sometimes included where you're kind of scared to resolve something because if you like resolve it too fast and you don't have anything set up afterwards, or you, God forbid, you don't have anything set up in the courthouse, you're like, okay, it's raining now, and the city dictates that everyone's got to stay inside when it's raining, and so you get pushed into an inn. And these are extreme
Don't do
examples,
that.
of course, but you want to keep in mind the types of conflicts you're throwing at your role players, and you want to keep in mind the scaling of the conflicts. Let them solve the little problems that happen in sessions in the session that it comes up. If the problem is where are we going to find water, you don't want to make it a 6-session arc where they're like,
Right.
They got to do 6 million things in order to do something simple. You want them to feel like they're stepping up a pyramid of attention, or they're stepping up a pyramid of like, okay, now we've got the base, now we got to find soldiers, okay, now we got soldiers, now we got to do this. You don't want to get laser focused on that central yeah, let's build a door.
Jesus Christ.
But yeah, that's kind of the thing is that if your players are really interested in something that can be solved pretty quickly, let it be solved. Let them move on.
And I think that's sort of, typically, I think what I try to follow is for every conflict that you throw in front of the players, give them a resolution when they solve it. And that resolution shouldn't be another conflict.
Right.
So they go do something if they need to. Their big quest is to take over the city, and the first problem is that there's 3 of them and a whole platoon of guards, right? So they go find help, and now they have people that will follow them, and they have that whole experience to explore. And there could be 20 other things after that to get them to their big goal, but each thing should have some little reward or some sort of resolution to it.
And it doesn't even have to be a reward. It can be just like a negative resolution. It's like, well, we tried to invade this guy's stuff, but he kicked our ass and kicked us out of the city or something like that.
Well, right. If they fail, or
Right.
if they, or if they choose to do something that obviously had no positive outcome, then certainly, but
Right.
a resolution nonetheless.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's
No, I think I'm more. Yeah, that's lucky. Mike was just saying the same thing. I'm what I tend to do more than having one single conflict that keeps developing more and more obstacles is that I'll throw like 8 or 10 different hooks just to see what catches, and I happen to get the party that picks up 6 of them or something,
yeah.
and so now they've got like the next 3 days are booked solid, and they've got to like not sleep to make all the meetings they want to or to get to all these events, because I was expecting them to only pick up like a third or something, and so that I think that's my thing, is I try to keep several plates spinning for the party so that they feel like there's that they're not just okay, let's get on to the next step of the big every session is just one step closer to the big goal that they've known that they've been, it's kind of okay, yeah, no, today we've got to deal with this bit of paperwork shit so we can get our blacksmith set up, because we want to run that for the next 3 months or something, because that's you want to run a corporation or something. But no, and then but while you're doing that, you're also working at taking out some of the thieves guild people who are dealing drugs and fucking up shit in the town or something. And then I think if you can resolve a conflict in a way that does build some additional conflict, or reveals a new conflict, or where, like you're saying, you don't feel like I worry about trying to steal that sense of like whatever satisfaction or accomplishment of actually going through and putting the effort into to resolve something narratively, or by murdering stuff. But I think you get a lot out of like cliffhanger endings, basically. If you can give them like, oh shit, like what are we going to do now? And then it's just like, and that's where we're going to call it tonight. And then you've got people like, oh, damn. Like, see, I can't wait for next week.
That coming to those kind of endings takes some knowledge of how to build arcs, because knowing to end a session there where they get some kind of revolutionary knowledge shows an awareness of like, and that is the beginning of an arc, where they have to deal with this new information or this new threat or this new development. And, you don't, there's, and it's kind of natural, I think, for people to kind of have a sense to where to end a session. I mean, like, I have never met a DM who's like, oh, it's 10 o'clock and we are done there in the middle of a conversation. I've never had a DM who's like, oh, 10 o'clock on the dot, and just stops role playing. And you're just like, oh, we'll just pick up this conversation next session, guys. And then you're just like, and what were we talking about? I've never, every DM that I've been under as a player character has always looked for some natural place to snip off the session end. Because there is that kind of feeling of what makes a good ending for a session and what doesn't make a great ending for a session. And it's like, it's hard to have that happen every time, because then it becomes, routine. But you want at least some kind of awareness of what the story is doing during the session, so that at the very least you can figure out a good place to end the session for the night.
I've found that the best sessions that I've run were ones that I was able to do that with. Whether it was a cliffhanger or just like a very picturesque moment, because you think about like watching a TV show, right? Or like reading a book at the end of the chapter. And sometimes it's the guy busts in the room and rips his mask off, and oh my god, it's the guy that you killed a month ago. What happened? Whoa. Okay, and then there's the end of the session or the end of the TV show or the movie or whatever.
Right.
And then there's ones where, the party's riding off into the sunset or whatever, or you arrive in this big town or whatever. And those kind of sessions, I feel like leave, because you want to leave that impression with your players so that they're looking forward to the next session.
Yeah.
and the sessions that I've run where, for instance, the last session that I ran for Mel Gibson's space game featuring the Bee Gees, it ended with a huge reveal, sort of like the players were basically interacting with this other lady who was like a con man, enemy of the party, and she sort of revealed herself, and they revealed themselves, and everybody kind of contended together, and then the session was over, and then everybody talked about it for like 2 hours after the session was over, and that kind of feeling as a DM is really great.
Yeah.
But you don't get those every time, because then every session, it's like every day you're have bad news, or
Yeah.
life isn't like that.
I sometimes have that problem with our podcast, Dragons of Paralandia, is that it's been such a short amount of time that you guys have been together, but it has been so crazy, like that amount of time, just because the how I build arcs within sessions and how you guys like attach to the role playing aspect and get in there so deep, is that I do sometimes feel like if you guys really like thought about the shit that you've gone through in the last month and a half, some of your characters would probably act a little differently. It's just like, dude, we've been cursed. Like this last 8 weeks have been the worst weeks of our lives, like
Right.
And yeah, I think that you kind of want some breathing room too in between, the big catastrophes, kind of like what you're saying, like that you don't want to end every session on a cliffhanger, and you can't end every session where they're like going off into the sunset. So I guess we can. We're now talking about how to end a session, guys, I guess.
Oh, yeah, that happened.
Yeah, Jesus. So what are other ways of satisfactorily ending a session if it's not like, well, you've buttoned up that town, time to go on to the next, or
Right.
you rip off the mask and it turns out to be the mayor's son's butler?
Rolling initiative. One of
Oh,
my favorite ways to end a session.
ooh, that's pretty good.
Then everybody kind of
Yeah.
comes in the next session like, okay, this is going to be combat.
Yeah.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
if you can get people arrayed out in a clear and obvious combat, and get out, see? This is what I'm talking about. That happened. Mm-hmm.
You need another trash can over that one in order to keep her out of the second trash can.
Yeah, bastard. Anyway, but yeah. So whatever I was just talking about, I continue making that point very eloquently.
Excellent. Point well made. No, we were talking about ending sessions on initiative rolls.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, if you can get them arrayed in a sort of obvious field of combat, so everybody knows the situation that they're in, and then they can spend a week kind of thinking about how they want to handle the combat. It's a pretty good way to get people interested.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be a great way to like make sure that you're not going to run over an hour and a half in your session.
Yep.
Because
combat do that.
Yep,
sometimes.
combat do that sometimes. And I really dislike ending a session in the middle of combat.
Oh,
I
God,
really don't
yeah.
like doing that. I find
I don't like doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can avoid it.
I find it throws everyone off their groove. Because you want combat to be like smooth. You don't want it to be super choppy. And
it's hard to keep track is the big thing. Like if we had to in that Tuesday game, and it's we ended up back at the top of the turn order right about when our time was over, and it was a pretty good transition. But a lot of combat doesn't work like that, and there isn't a really good point. And, it's like, okay, well, we got to spend another half an hour to get back to the top of the turn order so that we can get to a point where I won't totally forget where we are in initiative and everything fall apart when we come back kind of thing.
Yep.
But it will anyway, I feel like.
Exactly. I still miss some 2 people who were in buildings that were supposed to come into that, and and like there was just little bits that we weren't paying attention to.
But yeah, that's really disappointing way to.
But
Yeah.
it can work.
Yeah.
You can
Oh, yeah.
still
I think-
do it,
I
and
think
you
you'd
know,
have
it
to
can be
leave it.
done, but it's hard.
I think you'd have to leave that on a cliffhanger, right? You'd have to do
Right.
something at the top of that initiative that upped the stakes if you were going to end a session in combat. You know, oh, suddenly a third party joins the
Right.
fight, or you know, or they summon a fucking
This
demon or
explodes
something.
in fire, or
Yeah.
Right.
And I would also though it would be dramatic, highly suggest not ending a session with like in middle of combat when a character dies, because or if a character is
No,
down.
only end every session. End it with a character dying.
Yes.
That's what I say.
boom,
Yep.
get out of here.
But no, the reason that I say that is because you may have a situation where 5 people come to roleplay and only 4 get to for that session because the cleric got knocked out.
Or only one does, because happen to fall out of a tree.
Right. That was good. Played a lot of video games during that session.
It's my fault.
But no, yeah, it's that's so if we're ranking these, right? Ending a session in the middle of combat is not as great as ending a session at a resolution or right before combat or at some kind of cliffhanger.
Yeah, I think. I think that's generally. It's just hard to manage. It's hard to do the
Right.
bookkeeping. It's hard to keep everything straight without, even with stuff like Fantasy Grounds and
So-
internet and junk. But
What's a worse way to end a session than in the middle of combat? What's the worst way that you can think of to end a session? I mean, like in the middle of role play would be pretty bad. Like
oh no.
Yeah.
I'll be right back. I've got to go to the bathroom. That's the worst way to end a session.
oh my god, just straight up lying to your party.
They're all sitting
I
there.
gotta go get
like-
cigarettes. I'll be right back.
It's been 15 minutes, and they're like,
Send a message a half hour later.
good.
Sorry, guys. My wife needed my help.
Oh man, that is good. I was not expecting that level of badness. I don't.
Tonight on table 13, how to be a shithead.
Yeah, right? Don't do these things.
Don't do that.
Don't
Get
don't
out of
do
the
that.
trash.
Jesus.
I don't understand. Yeah,
Anyway,
threw away
I would
fucking
say
pizza shit,
like
you know.
in the middle of some like heavy story bit where there was a lot of role play or a lot of exposition, maybe right at the end of exposition, like like description of like, this is, hello, I am the druid master, blah blah blah, and here is the story of my people and why I need this quest done. All right, guys, I gotta
That's
go.
Yep.
Right. God, that's really
Big
bad.
lore dump that they don't get to
Ugh.
like digest or discuss, and then you just deuce out.
That would be pretty bad. Yeah. Yep.
But obviously I think it's like a TV show or anything.
Right.
You want to find a point where it's like one thing has resolved and you can introduce another wrinkle. For me anyway, that's my general goal, is like if you can they've just gotten done solving something, and then they just get the information about a new conflict, or
I try to do I guess it kind of in reverse. I try to figure out a way where to end it so that some kind of resolution has happened within the session. And sometimes that can be as little as they built a door, or
That was the best fucking door, though, dude.
It
That
was.
door will exist longer than the mind. They will dig that door up
Mhm.
5,000
made
years
of,
from
like,
now.
wood or something.
But it was
It's just-
wood
But it
and
was made out
love.
of wood and love. Yes.
Yep.
And love.
And love.
Good point. Yeah.
Teamwork,
I forgot. Heart.
But yeah, so it's I try to end on some kind of resolution that I either put forward earlier, in another session, or earlier that session. And sometimes that can make for sort of short, Jesus, sessions. But I just it's kind of how it goes sometimes. I don't like ending a session while people are in the middle of trying to do something. Yeah,
I'm a little less reticent, I guess. I don't mind it. Obviously, ideally, you want to get every session to have a nice, well knotted ending. But I try to, I'm not going to cut them off in the middle of a conversation with an NPC. But if they are on their way to go to the building or the state building to get some fucking paperwork done, but they happen to stop off and do something first, and that takes us right up until the time that we want to finish, and there isn't enough. I don't mind just saying, okay, well, yeah, we'll call it there. You guys will come back and we'll see if we can sort this out. It's just, but I do, yeah, you definitely want to finish whatever is going on immediately if you can, or get right as it's about to start.
I'm pretty horrible at ending sessions. I normally 90% of the time when my sessions end, it's at the players being like, "This would be a really great place." So either I'm a really terrible DM, right, or I just can't recognize the points at where it would be the best to stop the session.
exactly. That's funny.
I don't typically end it on a bad note, but I don't end it on a
Right.
good note either.
All right, interesting.
My name is Dagger Dan, and I got swords. I got knives. I got pole arms aplenty. If you need a melee weapon with a sharp end, come on down to Dagger Dan's. My blades are so sharp, I'm wanted in 6 kingdoms for accessory to manslaughter. Never have the deals been this good. Half price off katanas. Half price off axes. Buy 1 dagger, get 1 free. So get yourself and your gold over to Dagger Dan's, home of the largest dagger in the kingdom. Tell them Dan sent you.
I think I would like to allot the last half hour of these for answering questions that have been asked in the chat.
Okay.
That have been asked
Sure.
in the Discord, that are relating to what we're talking about.
Sure.
That way we can hit these questions, because I know Grandma Hater asked a couple questions here, and we never found a good place to
right
sort
on
of.
by.
Right.
Well, I mean, it would have been like on a tangent. Let me answer this, because by the time we were done with our statement, it was something else. But
Yes.
so question time.
Question time. Ooh,
Imagine
yeah.
there's like a big old thing that pops up.
We
here,
need one of
'cause that's-
those.
Yeah, don't at me, bro.
Yep.
Don't.
So
We are.
I feel like Grandma Hater is being a troll with this question. You're a troll, Grandma Hater.
But we love you anyway.
No, I think I get that reference. Actually, I might know who that is.
So I got what if you have a player that refuses to spend gold at your cool stores?
That one I don't. I guess put better stuff in them. It's the simple short answer. Whatever it is, it doesn't seem to attract their attention or their interest. Apparently, would
What
be
I always
my
do-
answer. But sorry.
What I always do is I'll put something that looks like it could be magic, but the guy doesn't treat it like it is, right? Or he'll tell you a big old story about something. Just pull a story out of your ass. This sword was forged by the great dwarven king. It's made out of obsidian. Blah 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 blah. And give it a big fucking tale. And it's just a sword, right? Or maybe it isn't. Maybe they touch it on every type of rock to see if it does something special. And one of those times you go ahead and use it to, wow, when it touches obsidian, it does something. I don't know, whatever. But it gives you a little something to play with. Add a little story to the mundane crappy equipment that they have at stores. But it's a pain in the ass to just make like a big old list of items for your people to want to buy. So you should be able to recognize from the player what they want, what they'd be interested in. And every once in a while, throw them a bone, right? And maybe make it cost a shitload because it's got a cool story behind it.
And then if it's cost too much, it's like an incentive that they can try and steal it or something. And then you have a whole side arc or something.
I really try to just get the players to go in there because they need something that's important for the campaign or for their goals. Otherwise, I just kind of let them decide what they need. You know, if they're like, I'm going into the armor shop, I'm not going to be like, and this is a list of 40 of his wares. It's just like, okay, why
Right.
are you going in
What
there?
do you want?
What are
Yeah.
you looking for? And
Right.
and then see if they, give some kind of answer. They're like, I'm just looking. Then like you see a bunch of shields. Some of
There's
them
a whole
look,
bunch of them.
Some of them look pretty. Some of them look kind of ugly, and others are just made of one material without any color. And you're like, oh, I want to look at the pretty one, and then you're like, okay. And
Man, I
then
want to
you
spend
kinda
gold
go,
in your store, Kyron.
Right?
This is great.
but that's the thing, is that you're not.
I think a lot of times players that go into stores and they want you to do that thing. They want you to give them a tin can that's got some kind of magic power behind it, right?
Right.
That was a shout out
Again.
to your space game you tried to run like 10 years ago.
Yep. No, I got it.
No, but I mean to give
Felt
a
that
little
shot my
bit.
way.
I feel like it's like exploring in a much safer place. It's a place for them to, I've got all this money where I can just throw gold at something to get treasure instead of to get
Now, see, that's a little different, I guess, because there's like, shopping for stuff where they're like, I need arrows, I need, a sword. And then there's like shopping as like an experience where your party just raided a dragon horde and now they get to go to the biggest market in the land. They're not actually looking for something, but they're like shopping. That's shopping.
But I feel
And
like you can marry those, right?
Yeah.
You can totally marry those. It just takes much more work to marry them, and I find that sometimes it's ouch. What is that? Episode 15, Dragon's Barrel. Check it out. My shitty DMing. But no, like,
This is why you don't record any examples of mine.
but no, yeah, like I find that if I put too much work into a shop or like wares, then that becomes the focus. Or if you put too much into it and then they just don't go there, it becomes like kind of like a bag of stuff that you then look for a way to get out of the folder of unused ideas. And it's so I tend to just go with what are you looking for, and then rough descriptions of things. And then if they get real ornery about it, I just start pulling shit out of my ass. Like, oh, that shield is blue, and it's got
It's a blue shield.
It's got runes on it. And they're like, I advise the rune keeper, and then I flip the desk and I go find
and
new
walk
party.
away because you just can't handle it anymore.
It's an ancient language sword.
You son of a bitch. Wait, what?
Oh Jesus!
Say sword,
yeah.
blades explode from the edges and chop your fingers off.
And that's how
you
the
son
fighter
of a
ended up
bitch.
with the shield named sword. But yeah, so yeah, it's the spending of gold in shops can either be really easy depending on the party or really, really hard. And it really is going to take you knowing your party to figure out which method is going to work the best for them. And as for like getting them to spend gold, if you have a party that's not like, oh, let's spend all the gold as soon as you get it, let me know, because my parties are usually like, oh, we have 100 gold. Well, here's 50 for the prostitutes.
There's no money in the. You've gotten like 100 gold that entire day of game.
Yep.
Okay.
Hey,
so
but you've
like
never
level
sat
10.
down to do an honest, any kind of honest labor.
Yeah, but
I mean, you did chop the
It's not
firewood for that
killed
guy.
50 people.
Yeah, but no one hired you to do it.
Yeah, but
I mean, they
didn't
attacked
have
us.
like much on them. Somebody hired them to do it.
Right.
Do we have another question?
Less shade thrown. At
Yeah.
we can just get to-
So I think this one is the one that Eric was talking about.
What's up?
And I don't know if this is actually a question, but I'm going to ask it anyway and answer it as if it were, so that you can feel bad
Good deal.
for asking it.
Nice.
Hear me out. What if you have a character that loves to play his horn, but is an orc barbarian that can't hold a tune?
It's its only problem if it's a problem with the party, man. Yeah,
Right.
It's like I thought it was funny.
It's that's how you generate quests. It pisses off people in the bar, and then somebody
Yeah.
That's I would
jacks
use
you
it
or
as a
does
lever.
some sort of
Yeah.
I would
on
not impose disadvantage on people who were trying to like cast spells while you were playing or something.
on another tangent, Mystery, define what you mean by a lever, because you've said
lever.
that a couple of times this
so
episode, and
it's
yeah.
So, like in physics terms, a lever is like a thing that you use to move stuff.
Yeah, it's in
basically.
the physics book under lever.
That's how it
definition.
defines it. But like that's the term. That's the sense in which I'm referring to it. The very clinical sense. But it's anything that you can use that gives you leverage against your party to kind of get them pushed in a certain direction. It's you call them hooks or levers or whatever. I mean, hooks, it's more of a passive thing that they either latch onto or not. Whereas for me, a lever is something like you threaten something you already know they care about to, force some sort of response. Maybe you don't get exactly the one you plan on, but you have at least like moved them from the point that they started into some other new position on something. So yeah, like that.
Excellent. Yes, that's a very good definition of that. So yeah, because you said that a few times, and I was just wondering if you would define that.
Mm-hmm.
That's like an Eric original.
That is an Eric original. Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
I'm gonna brand that one. There's a
Let's go
watermark
with that.
on that.
Let's pretend nobody
yeah.
said that. Yeah.
You would just own it, Eric.
Yep, it's mine.
There you go. That's good.
TM.
We got.
We've only got one more question and 26 minutes to answer it.
I'm gonna have to
Kyra,
stretch
so we
that
got to
shit
really
out from the
stretch
clock
this
here.
one out.
Okay.
The only other question that I found, unless somebody comes up with something in the meantime, is from Anarchy in September of last year.
Oh yeah.
That one.
And this one it's what do you do when there is too much going on in your campaign? We almost got to a perfect place to bring this up, and then we moved on.
Yep.
Like too many bad guys that are unaffiliated with each other, and I think this kind of I'm gonna point at Eric real quick, whichever direction he is from me on the stream. You,
Yep. Up in the, nope.
whatever. I don't know.
It worked. You did well.
When your party walks around and grabs 6 new quests, right? All because you made a whole bunch because you thought, well, maybe they won't talk to this person, or maybe they won't.
Right.
And you start spinning all those plates. It's fucking confusing. And so I will normally, I think Kyron's response is just resolve them for us. But
yeah, I mean,
somebody else killed him.
right. And I don't know. I try not to let that happen. I normally, as a player, I don't like feeling like I've got 40 different things going on, and they're all time sensitive. And I'm afraid I'm going to do the wrong thing and let something else slide and neglect it, and it becomes a bigger problem. So, and it's stressful. It's anxiety causing, right? So, as a DM, I try not to put my players in that position by just erasing shit that I wrote if they start interacting with it. Like if I build like 6 different things that can happen, I'll just after the first one, nothing else interesting happens. I mean, interesting stuff will happen, but it won't become a party like
Right.
I'll come fix this for me type situation.
I absolutely end up with, there's like, oh shit, I had him talk to about this thing, and this thing. And like, okay, so this one didn't like force my hand on a big event after it. It's going to kind of go by the wayside here unless they go and like, specifically talk to more people in the blacksmith's guild or something. And then, but I do find players who are just like, oh my God, hang on. No, wait, we're forgetting something, and they're like, feel like they're playing Oblivion or something. And they've got like this huge list of side quests that they don't want to let go uncompleted, kind of. Like, and regardless of the fact that there's the main quest that they're much more concerned about as like a pressing issue, but there's just like, oh yeah, but there's that thing we could get paid for over here, and go run and grab that thing for this guy. He'll set us up with this dude so we can, whatever. And like, I think you can still have a very fun game. Like, I still have some pretty cool things happen occasionally, because you let people choose the most boring thing first sometimes, or whatever they focus on, and then but it's usually because I've done stuff like what Brett's talking about, where you kind of just, all right, how do I boil this down and like retie this back into one of these other things and make it so that there's only 3 conflicts instead of 6 here.
Yeah.
They just ran into one, a couple of them twice or something.
And I will do exactly what Brett said, accused me of. I will just solve role players' conflicts for them because they haven't like done anything about this conflict, or I'll just like let it, explode, but in a way that doesn't affect the party too much, unless it's, something that they brought about themselves. But, an example is in DOP, the court case, and the
Hold
whole...
on. Has that been released yet?
No.
Oh,
Wait.
No. No.
Or
Okay.
did he said anything?
Right.
Ever?
A different example. I will think of one.
I'll just cut in and go over to Luck's second
sort of
question there.
Well, no.
Yeah.
I actually had something to add
go
on to
ahead.
it. Sorry. Oh my god, I did. Until I interjected.
Now.
Damn.
You had said a thing, and I was going to respond with another thing. Yeah, I got nothing. Go ahead and move on with what you were talking about, Eric.
What?
So how do you? I guess she was asking. So when they decide on this boring thing, do you try and weave that? Make that a shinier thing, or let them resolve the boring thing? And I try to do some 50-50. Like, sometimes it's just a boring thing, and that's okay. And you want the players to realize that, like, not everything that you're throwing at them is like a life or death struggle for someone.
Yeah.
That occasionally people are just like, no, like, it'd just be easier for me if you did it. Like,
right.
And so as a general rule, I like to make things important if the party's invested in it. But if they're not, and but they kind of just begrudgingly find themselves obligated, or whatever, it's been sat by the wayside for a while, I don't force that into. I don't try and make that something that they're interested in all the time, because that's really hard to do. If it's not like, if it's not a hook that they're trying real hard to chase down,
right.
And like, but I guess, if it's something that I'm not interested in, if it's just boring to me, then, I'm working pretty hard to try and turn it into something that is, if that means,
right,
making like a 27-page tax document or something.
Hey, I mean, it was fun to read. It really was. I enjoyed it.
I disagree.
I was cackling
there's
madly
no way
while I put that together.
There's no way that you would.
It was so fun.
That was so much fun to read that tax document.
I don't believe, that was fun to read either.
It was a little fun because I had to figure out how to not get, or how to get out of the situation that we were in.
Yeah,
right. It was kind of like a little bit of a mystery.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
cool.
And that's the other. There was like, I did, whatever. I'm gonna keep preaching the laurels of that kind of garbage forever. But it was burying a bunch of. There's still important bits in there that are buried in the minutia that talk about things you're dealing with right now in that game.
Ooh.
But it's buried under so much random shit. That
Right.
might as well be like in a foreign language.
And see, that's
to give you sort of a different take on what Eric said to Lucky Muggle, is essentially those boring things that you say you make like 5 quests and they vary from like go kill the rats in the basement to go get the cat out of the tree to go get this cataclysmic shard of chaos from another realm. You can dress that up if you're trying to like wow your party. If it's like it's supposed to be a session where or you got a high energy party and they just don't do well in boring situations, and you have to kind of cater to that. You can segue into the cataclysmic shard of the chaos realm from the cat in the tree. You can because those things aren't being used anymore. They're in your back pocket. They're extra things that you've got, and it's all just Lego pieces, and you're building this thing together. So just swap out. How did the cat get in the tree? Well, he fucking ate this cat food that was poisoned
piece of the
with
dimension
tainted
apple.
by the
that made him
chaos crystal,
fly up in the air or
obviously.
something. And I don't. This is all really terrible. But the idea is that you can
Nah.
take these things and just kind of shove them together, and make it mean something that segues into that more cool thing that they passed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, turn it into something cooler, or find a way to make what they're interested in interesting to you by connecting it to something else. If possible.
That's I think that to round out the episode that's a good way to look at building arcs. They're not like road. They're not like a road that you pave before the role players get there. They're like a bridge from the point where you are in a session or in a story to building it to a point that you want to get to using the material that the role players hand you. And so it's kind of like, building a bridge with materials that like 4 different people are just handing you. And you're like, okay, well, this brick, it's weird and misshapen, but if I put it here, then I can take this, half a bicycle and put it here. And now we're getting somewhere, and it's a community story building, but you have to have some kind of artistry when constructing these bridges into the points you want to go to. Because you really want to use what the player characters are interested in, and if that's something really mundane or really boring, turn it into something epic, by just using your noodle.
I will say that there are different things, though. What we're talking about and our sort of storytelling that we're giving, I think follows very much the hero's quest or the hero's journey or whatever. Or very traditional, just sort of like, rising action, falling action story. There are other things like mysteries. I had to do some research on mysteries because of the space game featuring the Bee Gees. That I wanted it to be kind of a noir thing, and so it wasn't your standard typical like, average Joe meets big problem and gets a tutor and blah blah blah,
Right.
passing the threshold. It was very much like this thing happened, and we're trying to figure out who did it, and that everybody's backgrounds poured into this thing, and they all had different knowledge of it, and so I had to come up with red herrings, and I had to come up with things that happened and things that didn't happen that I wanted the party to think happened, and I'm still going through that, and I think it pulls back a little bit to our conversation about bad things happening over and over again, conflict and conflict and conflict. I think this is an exception to that. This type of story thrives when you have the big Goron sword type situation where
Right.
you think you're about to come to a conclusion, and then there's another conflict, and that's I think what adds to the tension of a mystery. And
But
so this type of go ahead.
well, I just wanted to add in that just because it's not a hero's journey, building tension is still going to be the same. And so, like for the noir campaign, you don't want to do like reverse clues where a clue leads them to the same kind of string of problems that would approach quest a party that just gets a bunch of quests, because you can kind of look at the clues in a mystery as quests in that they're supposed to inspire some kind of action from the player characters, and that action can either be in the right direction or in the wrong direction, or it can be inaction. there's there's like runaway mystery where the mystery is just encased in too many red herrings or too many like things that don't make sense and it becomes impossible to solve.
Right.
And yeah, I just like caution against the idea that if you're not doing, I guess like there are pitfalls to every kind of plot build, because there's also like survival campaigns, where it's not even a, like it's not a hero's journey and it's not a mystery. It's stay alive during the zombie apocalypse, and even in that kind of thing, you don't want to turn it into them just hiding in a bunker the whole time,
Right.
or
Oh yeah,
you know,
there's absolutely, and I the thing you were talking about with like the runaway mystery, yeah, that's absolutely, and that's what I was kind of running into trying to put it together and building a mystery. There's a whole process to it. I'm not going to
Yeah.
get into it here so much because this isn't really about building a mystery, but it's something that you have to be careful doing, because it's like a puzzle, right? Like
Mhm.
in a dungeon. It's like you go into a dungeon and you give them a riddle or some kind of little puzzle to play with where they're trying to figure out the right answer to it. And if you've got like one answer and it's hard to come to that conclusion, then the party's just gonna get frustrated and stop
Yeah.
giving a shit. I think when building a mystery, it's really important to just sort of like guide the players and let them experience it. And when they, don't make them solve the mystery. It's not about solving the mystery. It's about feeling like your players solved or your characters solved
Yeah.
the mystery. It's not a novel. It's not a video game.
Yeah, and there are great, like, in it, to kind of connect it to more, other forms of media. Like, there are really great mysteries that the audience knows the entire time what, the solution to them. It's not really like a mystery. There's just a wrinkle about how it happened or something like that. Like, or like shows like Monk, like they show you how it happens at the beginning and then they go into the episode. You know what I mean? Like, there's ways to allow that meta knowledge and still, I guess, like have it, to have a functional and enjoyable experience, because your players know that their characters haven't accessed certain stuff or something,
Right.
too, I think. But I think you're going to lose a lot, though. It's sort of like riddles. If it's, I don't know, yeah. If it's just an objective, you either have that information or don't, like you're saying. If there's a binary right and wrong answer, then
Right.
It's going to be hard to make that feel super satisfying unless they just figure it out, or whatever, unless the player's figuring it out.
The last question is, dang, where do all those cute ass D&D players come from? I have to say
Iowa.
that they,
Iowa.
yeah, well,
Yep.
so the flag there,
It's corn fed.
the corn.
I was
Something
grown in a
the
vat
corn.
to be
Mm.
a dungeon master. A vat of corn, creamed corn.
I'm disgusted.
That's right.
It's really gross.
That's where I
yeah.
gestated.
That's why
For
it's the
13
corn that
months.
makes you eat kiwis with the skin on them still.
Yes.
That's what it
Yes.
was.
It was
It's
the
the kiwi skin.
creamed corn.
That and the
Birthing
fucking
vat.
uncooked onions, like they were apples. Madman.
Hey, it's a
I
healthy
haven't-
way to
I
eat them.
I don't think that's true.
It's for all the vitamins are in the
Oh my
skins.
gosh.
So
Yeah, you want to do our close here? I guess
Yep.
we're getting.
yeah, I
Do
think
it.
so. So it's 11:51 p.m. in Central Standard Time Zone,
That's
which means
Iowa time.
that it's time for us to basically tell you about all the cool things we're doing and all that stuff. So we are doing we have our fuck.
Yep.
Completely lost my train of thought.
Killing it.
We have our podcast that will be released tomorrow. Will be our 17th, 16th, some 10th episode.
Mhm.
It's every other Friday we release it. Every other Monday prior to that for the patrons, $5 or more. It's been going on for a while and it's great. It's a lot of fun. You can see it. You can listen to it on like Apple, everything. Yeah, the fucking all the different things, the iTunes stuffs and the Spotify, all that. It's
And
great.
even the poor people apps like Podbean and
Right? Yeah.
stuff.
I mean, Spotify doesn't cost any money for you to listen to.
Oh yeah, you're right. No, that's just the ad-free version. I take it back.
Right. Yeah.
That's Dragons of Paralandia. It's a lot of fun. We also do a stream every other Monday. We didn't last Monday because Kyle was sicky poo, and I think I was sicky poo too. I don't remember.
It was Monday before.
Not this Monday. The Monday, whatever. Next Monday is
The one
Gods of
coming up.
Aether here on Twitch. Two of us are in it, and it's a ton of fun. It's got a really cool intro. We have West March's game in the Discord. Join the Discord. It's linked below. It's open to anybody who wants to play. It's 5e. You use D&D Beyond for the character sheets and all that stuff. So join there and ask about the Rusty Nail West Marches game.
Yeah.
We also have all sorts of other games going on in there. And if you like what we're doing, give us money on Patreon, like $1 million or something.
All the dollars.
There's stuff there. You get like there's at $5 you get an avatar that I draw for you, and you get put in monthly giveaways. This last month we gave away a copy of the whatever Guide to Wildmount, whatever the hell, that new book that came out like literally 2 days
Explorer's
ago.
Guide to Wildemount.
That one.
Yeah.
We gave that away, and I think who won it? I don't
Kyle,
remember who won
right?
it. Kyle won it. Yeah,
Kyle, yeah.
Kyle
He did.
won it. So
He did.
congratulations, Kyle West,
You,
on
Kyle.
your
Woohoo!
book.
On your victory
Um,
over everyone
and
else.
and I don't know what we're doing next month, but we'll give something cool away.
Yeah.
Yeah, so join the Discord, be our friends.
Do it.
Love
Subscribe
us.
to our Twitch. Follow our Twitch. We have a YouTube. Follow and subscribe and hit bells and
Yep.
smash
Whistles.
that like button
Oh,
or
and
whatever.
Go to the website, buy our shirts and stuff.
Oh yeah, we have merch. We have merchandise and stuff there too. So
Yes. Please
um,
consume.
that horrible work has been so terrible. So my brain is just
Right.
ruined, which
It's
is
fine.
why this is horrible and terrible.
Okay.
It's been a rough week.
So everybody,
Living
practice your
now.
social distancing
Everybody.
and
Wash your
Everybody.
hands
goddamn
washed.
hands. Yes.
Wash your
and buy all the
hands.
toilet paper at the grocery store.
Don't fuck.
No, don't
Just,
don't do that.
like
And we will see you on Monday. Well, two of the three of us will see you on Monday.
Goodbye.
Have a wonderful week.